I wasn't even recording, man. That was really good. It might have got a little bit of it. No, it's not cool now. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. God, we haven't done one of these in a while. It's the holiday season, hunting. I've been gone in Kansas. Everybody's been hunting, doing crazy things. Matt was just here. We didn't even record a podcast.
Too much time out in the woods.
We spent a lot of time in the woods. We got a little crazy. I injured my back, and Matt injured a hog.
Yep.
Cody killed one, which was pretty fun. You guys want to recap a little bit, what went down that week? You guys hunted more than I did.
Yeah,
you ditched us.
I had work. I had a job to do. Unfortunately, this YouTubing doesn't really make any money.
Well, the hangover Saturday morning might have not helped either. But
I wasn't hungover. I was fine.
So
I got out that afternoon and I got you on hogs like that.
You did. That's true.
Yeah,
you did. So I got in late Thursday, Friday morning. Cody and I get out after him, and I don't know within the first half hour, where Cody and I are walking down either side of this canal, and I'm a little bit ahead of him. He had to go around, and I see some rustling on his side. And I'm trying to look, and I just can barely make out a dark mass. I can't see anything other than just there's something dark that's moving this bush around. There's some other bushes moving around. I'm all right, I'm pretty sure it's pigs. So I know Cody's behind me. We're tracking each other's location. All I say in the text is pigs. And while I'm putting my phone back into my little pouch in the front, one of them just takes off. I'm like, shit. But the other ones are still around because I can see the bushes moving. And I don't know, 30 seconds later, boom, Cody's muzzle loader goes off. I just see this cloud of smoke right next to me, and I can't see anything. I can hear the pig just squealing, so I figure he hit something. But, yeah, I'll let you take over at that point, Cody, because you got to see that part.
And then immediately you started apologizing for that.
Yeah, that should have been Matt's pig. We decided which side to go on. And we'd seen them on Matt's side, never been to the side I went on, and of course they're over there. But
that's the way it goes.
Hey, I'm happy that you were able to get one, because if I took the shot, I probably would have just missed anyways, or just injured it, and I would have ran off and for the end of it.
At least you got some meat to take home, so you finally got some hog meat. But yeah, and then we went out and literally throw the bikes down, walk 20 yards, and it's what's that sound? And there's there had to have been 20 or 30 hogs hanging out back there.
I don't know if there were that many. There were definitely a lot of piglets.
I think, including the piglets.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a crap load of hogs. And Matt got a shot, just didn't really work out.
I had a foot wide shooting lane, and there was a pig that was moving real close to us outside of the shooting lane. So I was trying to reposition and get into a better spot to see that pig before it stepped out right on top of us. And that was just a mistake because it was completely blind. I couldn't see anything. So I'm getting back into the shooting lane view. And right as I'm getting back into that view, this one hog starts walking by at, I don't know, 20 yards, if that.
Yeah.
And, I'm using a firearm with a little scope on it. So by the time I get the scope up on the thing, it was a completely black hog, and all I could see was just black. I knew its head had already passed, so I just tried to shoot as far forward as I could. But, it was probably just a poor shot at that point. Shouldn't have pulled the trigger in reality, because not long after that, there's another pig that goes by. If I just waited, I would have had a shot at that one. But
if you waited 2 seconds, you would have shot the other one. And the other one was a brown hog, so you can see the creases on the body a lot better and know where you're shooting. Those black hogs, people don't talk about that enough. It's hard to know what you're aiming at, especially when you have a scope and you're zoomed in on the body,
Yeah.
Can you explain the sugar hog? You meant the hog I got was brown. It was the first one that I've seen.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is a real. I don't know if this is a real thing. I've heard rumors So they call them honey hogs.
Honey hog.
Maybe some of our viewers will have like experience with this, but I've never seen one. But so there's like a lot of weird traits in our hogs because they're domestic pigs that kind of got out and like went wild and mixed in with the wild hogs that were released by the Spaniards back in the day. So there's like all kinds of weird traits out there. So there's some areas where you'll find hogs that have that the Yorkshire hog pattern, where it's like a white band that goes like across the shoulders. So you'll see wild pigs that look like that. You'll see wattle hogs that have like literally little fat nodules like hanging off of their wattles, like their little cheeks. And then there's these honey hogs, which I don't know if it's true, but like apparently they don't have split hooves. They have like just a single hoof instead of the cloved feet. And yeah, like apparently, I don't know, they smell like sweet when you cut them open, and their fat is like yellow, and the meat's like really marbled and super fatty. Like, I don't know, I have a feeling that when people have found hogs that are like that, they're probably just like domestic pigs that escaped and have been feeding on like corn and stuff for the longest time. But I don't know. Danny, like him and his friend got one like decades ago, and he like always talked about it ever since. And I've heard other people mention it too, but I've never seen one. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you know what a honey hog is, drop a comment, because like I'm curious. Anyway,
mythical creature, as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those in Florida. We got skunk apes and everything. Sorry, I'm shifting my little platform here. But anyway, let's talk about this research real quick. Or I guess we got a couple announcements first.
I was going to say.
But yeah, so this podcast, we're going to be looking at a study that was published in 2012 by Stephen Webb. And of course, one of the researchers that's involved in this is Bronson Strickland. It seems like all of the really interesting deer research, that's applicable to like hunting involves Bronson in some way. And so what they're doing here is they're looking at the effects of selectively harvesting whitetails for certain antler traits and how that like affects the genetics and phenotypes within a population. So they're doing this using a modeling approach. A really, really cool study. I think there's a lot of cool takeaway messages from it. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But before we get into it, we do have a few announcements. So first of all, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers did their small game hunt in Dinner Island Ranch this past weekend. Unfortunately, I injured my back, so I wasn't able to go, but I did hear from people that it was, as always, a really good time. Lots of new hunters were able to get their first harvests, and there was some cool raffle prizes. So if you want to go to events like that, these are specifically geared to like new hunters. If you're trying to get in the woods for the first few times and you still need a little bit of guidance, think about coming to these. There's another one happening at Triple N Ranch, and that's going to be in late January. I don't remember the exact date, but we'll put it in the description. And then
can I ask, what is it? Mostly squirrel hunting people are doing?
It's whatever you want to do, but yeah, a lot of times people are focused on squirrels. There's usually some people that are out there looking for hogs, but people shot rabbits. People go out and shoot raccoons. Like, there's all kinds of things you can go after. You can go duck hunting if it's duck season at the time, and you could also go for like snipe and doves, and it's whatever you want to do. Like, it's not really like targeting anything specific. It's more so just trying to get people in the woods with a little bit of guidance, and then everybody gets together like afterwards and does kind of a potluck wild game lunch and raffles and stuff.
That sounds fun.
So there's the one in Triple N Ranch, and then there's going to be one in February in Upper Hillsboro WMA that's co-hosted with American Daughters of Conservation. They haven't figured out the date for that one yet, but it will be in February. So just keep an eye out for that. And if you're not a member of BHA yet, just go become a member. It's like $35, and that money goes to all kinds of good stuff. And then there's my event, the Saddle Hunter 3D Archery Challenge and Workshop. This is an event I've put on several times. This one's going to be February 7th. And basically, people get together. I get a whole bunch of companies to send all their saddle gear, and you can come and try it all out, sit in it, touch it, stand on platforms and sticks and all that stuff. We'll be doing like climbing demos. Cody's going to show how he climbs with sticks.
I am? Okay.
Yeah, volunteering you right now because you climb with sticks way better than me. Last time I climbed with sticks, I broke my back.
No, I've seen you climb with sticks, and you look like a squirrel climbing up the tree. I don't like heights.
Not the other day. Now I'm crippled, but I'll be doing like rope climbing and one sticking and stuff like that. That's my game. But Cody likes sticks, so we'll be showing how we do that, and then we have people like do their show and tell to like show some of their customizations. Cody's gonna show you how to make what do you call those things, like whoopee slings or something that you carry your sticks with, whatever. Like whatever customizations people have going.
I didn't know I was signed up for all this stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I'm signing you up for all kinds of stuff, man. And then on top of that, we also do a 15 target 3D archery tournament that you shoot from a saddle. So you get to like practice shooting from a saddle in weird positions and stuff. It's a ton of fun. And all the proceeds from, I didn't even mention. So all the items that are sent in from the companies, we raffle them off at the end. And then all the proceeds from the raffle go towards the Scientific Outdoorsman Foundation, which is my nonprofit organization now. And pretty much that money is going towards getting scientists to like FWC meetings and things like that so that we can fight for the hunting community. And this is my last announcement. I think Matt's got a couple more. There's also the Florida Archery Unleashed event, which Skull Hill Archery puts on every year. It's a 50 target 3D tournament, and it's actually happening at the same time in the same place as the Saddle Hunter event, except his will last 3 days. It's February 6th to the 8th. You can come any day and shoot all 50 targets, or you can, camp out and split it up into multiple days. So there's going to be links in the description for all of these things. So if you guys want to come to some awesome events, I'd love to see you there, and you can support some awesome organizations. All right, Matt, take it away.
Just a couple on my end. First, last chance for folks to get the Turkey Federation gun calendar raffle calendars, I guess. Mine. Yeah, Mark got his. So it's $60. That includes your $35 membership to the National Wild Turkey Federation and entry into 52 raffles throughout all of 2026. So every week during 2026, another firearm's getting raffled off. And it's 1 in 1,000 chance of winning every single week. So that's, if you account for that $35 membership, that leaves $25 that you're putting in towards this calendar for over 50 raffles. So that's less than 50 cents per raffle. It's hard to find that kind of deal anywhere. So because those raffles start the first week of January, sales end the last week of December. So really last chance. We'll put a link down below for you guys to purchase those online if you'd like one.
And I just want to point out that all of my coolest guns have come from raffles. Like literally, I haven't bought a new gun in like a really long time, and all of my favorite guns that I use are raffle items. So you can definitely win.
Yeah.
I've never won from this thing, but this is my year.
He's only done it once though, so
that's true. This is my year.
And probably is your
shotgun
luck with stuff. So
I don't know. Sometimes I'm lucky. I've had a lot of luck this year. I won that rifle at BHA Rendezvous. Mm-hmm. I shot that buck, both of these bucks. So I think my luck's kind of run out. I think I learned that when I broke my damn back.
Second announcement for anyone on the West Slope here in Colorado. Our local Turkey Federation chapter, the Black Canyon Longbeards, is having our annual banquet on Saturday, March 28th, right here in Montrose. Ticket sales for that are, I believe, $60 a person. I think there's $100 for couples. And yeah, we've got all sorts of great items getting raffled off there too. It's a great event. We're going to have some local catering. Just a great opportunity to meet other folks in the local area that want to contribute to conservation and also a hunting heritage. Those are kind of the two big things with Turkey Federation. Even though turkey's in the name, it's really about habitat and conservation. And I think something like 90% of every dollar that Turkey Federation makes goes right into conservation projects. So, if nothing else, you're getting a meal and you're contributing to some great efforts through the Turkey Federation.
Yep. Yeah, actually, the first turkey I killed in Minnesota was like when we were going in, there was like a sign there that said like NWTF like did habitat improvement on this land. I was like, thanks.
Yeah, they do a lot, and actually, they're the largest purchaser of timber in the country because timber, there's a lot of wood out there that nobody wants to buy. It's kind of crap wood. And a lot of that wood is what creates a lot of wildfire risk. So Turkey Federation steps in there to help get that wood off the landscape. And it might not be your flashiest, sexiest conservation project, but that's something that has a huge impact. And again, it doesn't just help the turkeys; it helps everything out there that's going to be impacted by those wildfires. So, and that includes people. These wildfires get real close to our communities, and just being able to help minimize the threats of those fires, you're making an impact.
It's such a funny concept because like in Florida, we're like desperate for fire all the time. Like it's such a fire dependent system, like we need the fires. Like other places, the fires start and it's like, it just decimated 7 million acres,
We need the fires here too. It's just, they're getting to a point where they're just so strong, there's a few fires around here this past year. One of them was only like 50 acres. Another one was like 5,000 acres. But then you have ones that are like hundreds of thousands of acres. And those are like, you don't want it to get to that point. Because at that point, it's burning to the point that's beyond having benefits to the landscape, because it just destroys everything. Those smaller fires are a lot more beneficial because, the taller trees are able to survive it. Exactly. And so there's value to the fires here too. But again, if you just have all this fuel out there, just the
never stop.
Impacts. Yeah. And the impacts of the fire are just totally different. Anyway,
let's talk about deer.
Yeah.
So,
wait, just real quick, current event thing. We didn't talk about this.
Cody's finishing his PhD. I feel like that's an announcement we should probably make.
That's a big one.
Did you submit your dissertation?
I did.
Yeah, there you go.
Congratulations. I think everybody should drop a comment and tell them congratulations.
It was just to my advisor, though, so it's just one.
I mean, it's still a big deal, man. Like, that's a lot of work that went into that. And, me and Matt have been there, so we know how big a deal that is. So good job, dude. Now go kill another buck.
I'm trying. Thank you. Do you have anything quick, like real quick, on that that 4-acre like peninsula that the state just bought, Florida just bought, $83 million. We bought it from some Louisiana guy out of Louisiana, and it was from the wildlife corridor money. Apparently, it's in Destin, Florida. Like you look at it on a map, and it looks just like worthless land. You haven't heard anything about that?
I don't know, but I've been in contact with the wildlife corridor folks. I could reach out to them and see what. I mean, I haven't heard about it, but what I do know is that the wildlife corridor is usually trying to get a hold of lands that could be, as the name implies, a corridor for wildlife. So I don't know, maybe it is some land that is worthless, but it might be the only land that's available to create a connection between two habitats. And so maybe there's plans to like restore that habitat to restore that connectivity. I don't know. I'll have to look at it, but I don't know anything about it.
Look it up, and stuff I was seeing online, he has some ties to like donating to DeSantis political campaign, and I don't know. It could be good. Hopefully it's good, but it could definitely be sketchy as well.
You should have told me about that before the podcast.
I just thought of it. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
We gotta like write this down and talk about it in the next podcast because I'm definitely interested.
It just happened like a couple days ago. The deal went through.
I'll also throw you guys on the spot. Any updates on the bear hunt?
Some bears have been killed. Yeah, I mean the bear hunt is going on, and honestly, like the anti-hunters have been relatively quiet, I feel like. It's not like last time. Like, I think, one of the big problems was like last time, because the anti-hunters were like so up in arms. Like, a lot of the hunters, like when they harvested bears, like they were really obnoxious, like on the internet, and like showing, like calling out anti-hunters and stuff. And I think that there's, I don't want to say there's like a mutual respect, because I don't think that the anti-hunters really have any respect for us. But I think maybe like the hunters learned their lesson that, like, this isn't like a good way to represent the hunting community. It's not really who we are. And I think they were just like kind of trolling almost, and that just like fueled the fire. Mm-hmm. So it's been pretty timid. There's been some harvests. I think I think the success rate is going to be a lot lower than the anti-hunters said it was going to be. They're like, oh, you guys are going to be tagged out in 2 days. And I mean, I think we're about to come up on the last weekend. This coming weekend, I'm pretty sure is our last weekend of the hunt. And I think there's still a lot of tags that haven't been filled yet. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year. It's obviously an adaptive management approach. So like low success rate might mean they're going to allocate more tags in the future. But I don't know. I think it's been successful thus far, and it hasn't like blown up in a negative way. So
that's good. Yeah.
We'll see. Right. There's still plenty of time for people to get crazy, but
yeah. Once the FWC releases reports on like numbers harvested or something like that, or whatever it might be.
Well, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last podcast. I don't think I did, but FWC got sued by Bear Warriors United, which happens every single time. They filed like an injunction to like stop the hunt. On the basis that it was like unscientific and there wasn't like enough data, and the courts threw it out because they didn't feel like there was enough evidence to support that claim. Really any evidence to support that claim. I mean, we've gotten into the science of it. There is a study that came out that showed like in one of the areas in Florida, there was a decrease in the population. And so they did decrease the quota in the area that's adjacent to that. But the area that the study was done in is like not actually in the hunting zone. But even though it's like not in it and it is adjacent to it, they still like reduced the quota in there a little bit.
Do you remember what area?
What?
Do you remember what area?
I believe it's up in the northeast region or north central region, like I think around Tallahassee, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, like the anti-hunters are using that, like, well, that's the most recent data we have, and so if there's been a decrease there, then like there must be a decrease everywhere. But I think this whole argument is going to be put to bed when they finish the data analysis for this like census data that has already been collected, but they probably won't publish it until the end of 2026, maybe 2027. And that's basically going to show that the population is like double what it was in 2015. And once that comes out, like, it's like, what are you going to argue at that point? like, what are you going to pull out of your ass next? Because that's been the basis of their argument. It's like, well, we don't know because the last data came from 2015. So, but then when the new data comes out and it says the opposite of what they've been saying it will, then I don't know. I feel like the argument will at least be put to bed for a little while. Mm-hmm. But they'll never stop. They're not conservationists. They don't want conservation. They just want to cuddle with bears.
All right. Well, we're about 25 minutes in, so why don't we start talking about deer here?
Let's talk about some deer. So the reason that I wanted to do this paper, I've been wanting to do it for a while. This was like prompted by like somebody made a stupid comment on Facebook, but it's a comment that you'll like see a lot. So basically like, it's #cullbuck. People will post a picture of like a buck that's a small buck, and then they put like, oh, I culled this buck, or #cullbuck, because the buck is smaller than what they wanted to kill or their friends wanted them to kill. And it's like people need like an excuse to shoot smaller bucks. And the idea behind this is like, if you remove like genetically inferior bucks, then you'll only allow superior bucks to breed. And therefore, like the herd's genetics will improve, and you're only going to get like better quality antlers. And so people will do this for like two different types. Like it's like the older deer that don't have big antlers. It's like they've already reached max potential, but it's not much. And then there's like removing spikes. People don't like spikes because they say that if a buck has spike antlers, then like it doesn't have great growth potential, whereas like other first year bucks will have like forks or even 6 points if they have better growth potential. So these are the things that like people are removing and sort of using this excuse, and it like always starts arguments online because people are like, well, if you're not happy with, like, if a deer comes by and you're like not excited about it, like why'd you shoot it? Like why are you making excuses shooting a little buck if that's not what you want? Like if you're going to shoot something, you better be damn proud of it. And just for the record, you don't need an excuse to shoot small bucks. Shoot small bucks. If you want to shoot small bucks, like that's fine. At the end of the day, when you open them up, there's venison inside, and that's kind of the point of hunting. And so I always get like really frustrated when people start talking about culling, but these stupid comments like kind of raise the question, like, does culling actually work? And so this paper that we're going to be discussing like really gets at that question. So Matt, do you want to go through like the methods a little bit? Like I feel like
I can do that.
Talking here.
So like Mark mentioned earlier on, this paper really uses modeling approaches. So they didn't look at any field-based research directly. They did cite some other work that was based on some actual live animals, but most of what they were doing was just running simulations. And then they did use that research previously on live animals to kind of fact check the output that they were getting. So there were a few different types of simulations and models that they looked at. They started off with computer simulations where they looked at responses of white-tailed deer and their antler size to different amounts of this kind of culling or selection. And so they did this model simulation and included a bunch of different parameters, so different types of factors, variables that could influence the antler size in addition to just the selection pressure, that culling pressure. So things like heritability is really important. There's been a lot of research that's shown that, there is a genetic component to antler growth, whether it be, the size of the antlers or the shape of the antlers. That's kind of well known, that's well established. If you think about stories where, there's this really unique buck that you see, and then there's other deer that are younger that have similar antlers, there's a good probability that those deer are related. So we know that there's some degree of heritability, right? It's not going to be perfect, but a lot of this growth is going to be inherited from the parent. If there was no heritability, then this culling stuff would have no importance whatsoever because there's no possibility for a genetic transfer. And then there were some other things that they looked at, like population size, mating ratios, and put all this stuff into the model to see what really was a driving factor for the future size of the antlers. And
they used so many words that like annoyed me. Like they said, number of offspring weaned per female, fecundity. Why say it like that? Or the mating ratio, like it's the sex ratio. Like, why are we making this more complicated?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There were some things that I think they could really improve when they make things concise, but that's why we're here. That's why we're here to help break this stuff down for everyone.
Yeah.
And what I will say, what's nice about these models that they're able to run is they can look at multiple generations. Imagine you wanted to do a study on the effects of this different selection on deer. You're not going to see a result with the first generation of offspring. You want to be able to let these influences stick around for a while. So you have multiple generational effects, and they're able to look at like the effects after, like, I think they went up to like 20 years with some of these models because the ultimately they want to have management implications, and they figure that 20 years is an appropriate time scale for something that managers would want to invest into. If you don't have a result after 20 years, it's not going to be worth it for a manager to put in all that effort to make that change. So that was one of the things that they looked at, was that computer simulation, and the metrics that they were looking at in terms of, the influence on the bucks was the number of points on the rack, and then they also used the Boone and Crockett standards for just like the total antler mass. And for folks that might not be familiar with that includes the length of the main beams, spread between the main beams, and a bunch of circumference measurements, as well as measurements for each of the points. And it's kind of important to mention that if you have, say, you just have a fork, there's going to be fewer measurements, fewer circumference measurements, and also fewer point measurements, just because you have less material there that you're working with. Whereas if you have like an 8-point buck, you're going to have more circumference measurements, you're going to have more of those points. So there is some relationship. If you have more points, then just by nature, you're going to have also a higher Boone and Crockett score, or what do they call it in this antler score? They just called it that. They also looked at a captive simulation. So this is if you have basically like a farm, right? If you have a farm where you've got all these deer and you can completely manipulate everything in that system. And then they had a selective pressure on it, where you're not just culling the bucks, but you might also cull does. So if there's a doe that is only producing spikes, you can prevent that doe from reproducing in the future. So you're really creating this really highly selective pressure for larger antlers in the population.
And I think that point right there is like also really important though, because like in nature, like you cannot select does. You know nothing about their hereditary, like what genetics antler wise they're carrying around with them.
And that's something that they talk about later in the papers. Like, I don't want to give away a spoiler alert, but there are a lot of differences between what you would see in a captive setting and what you would see in a free range situation. And that's why the final model that they had was that free range model or simulations, where basically ran the same thing, but in a natural setting. So you have a deer population that you're manipulating with these simulations and looking at things like the age structure, mating success, again, the heritability. Heritability is a variable metric in nature. It's not something it's the same for every single individual. It's something that you can have individuals where it's more likely to pass on that trait or less likely to pass on that trait. So they're able to fluctuate that to see how that would influence the ability to cull a population and create a new population that genetically is more likely to produce these larger bucks or larger antler bucks. And again, because these are all simulations, no model is correct. Well, that's kind of an understanding among all scientists. Some models are useful. And the reason that no models are correct is because there's multiple assumptions that you have to put into these models. We have to make assumptions about processes that occur in the natural world that we have to incorporate into the model. And that includes things like the values that they're using for some of these inputs. They're all based on research that's been conducted previously. So assuming that those values for things like value for how heritable a trait is, that those are correct. They also have assumptions on things like survival rates or reproductive rates, age structure. These are all things that there's literature out there to inform the model. So the model is likely going to be useful, but again, there's going to be error with this. So we can still imagine that whatever results are coming up are probably going to be close to what we'd expect to see in nature, but maybe not perfect. And that's where they wanted to include some data from the previous work that was done on an actual on live animals to see if the model results are matching what was done with live animals.
I just want to add though, like, I don't know, I feel like that's like not a great way to explain modeling to somebody who like doesn't understand modeling. It's like I don't know. I don't like the idea of saying like not like no model is correct. Like it really depends also though on like the model fit. Like how well the model fits the actual data. And so that's kind of what Matt's like about to get into is like when you compare that model to a real life situation, you get a pretty good idea of like how accurate that model really is. And, like he said, you're using previous studies to like inform the assumptions. You're not just like making assumptions just like willy nilly, like, all right, fuck it, this is good enough. Like you're really thinking about like, is it okay to make this assumption and why? Mm-hmm. And so they did that in this case. And they do talk about the assumptions that they've made. But those assumptions also kind of give you like insight to like, why this model is like more conservative than it would be in a real life situation. And I think that's important. It's like if you're being extra conservative with your model, then like that the real life situation is worse or better depending on which way you're looking at it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I also want to point out like models can still be extremely useful. They can still be very accurate. And so even though you're right, it is kind of an overstatement to say that all models are wrong, but it's the main point is that there's other things that they had to account for that we don't have a perfect number for. There's variability that's just going to happen naturally. There's things that we can't really explain that just happen, and so the model does the best it can to mimic what would occur in a real life situation. And like I said, then they run this model for multiple iterations. So I think where are they talking about? So they had 4 different parameters for the free range model. They had 4 different parameters that they kind of looked at.
Before you get into the free range, like, I would talk about the captive bred one because I guess you kind of already did. Never mind. I'll just shut up.
So there's definitely a lot more details about these models that if you wanted to really get into it, but I think just to kind of understand like the overall principle of what they're looking at, they wanted to see how, whether you have deer in a captive setting that you manipulate extremely intensely, what does the antler growth after multiple generations look like? And you can kind of think of that as being like your control group. If you don't see anything in that case, like there's no change in their antler growth, then culling has no influence. It's going to have, because there's no way that you'd be able to match that in the free range situation. So you have kind of what's the maximum potential for culling to influence antler growth in that captive setting. And that was informed by that, the actual, the previous study that looked at something similar with real animals. And then you have this free range side. So now we don't have all of that control. How does the change in antler growth over an extended period compare? Is it high? Does it match what was done in the captive setting? Is it potentially higher, or is it like minimal? Is there no pretty much change in that antler growth over time?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Well, because I'm the one who didn't read this.
Your job.
You guys done a good job explaining it so far, but just for maybe people who are semi-familiar and for myself, what kind of models are they running?
It's like a pre-packaged model called PopSim. So they're population simulation models. And so within that model, they're able to manipulate variables like heritability, population size. We already talked about these. But then some of the things that they added in are selection for specific phenotypes. So like, for instance, like removing spiky yearlings and, older bucks with smaller antler sizes, mate selection, like preferences, and then only culling in adult age groups. So they manipulated all of those things. I guess we can kind of get into the results. Do you have more questions about the model type?
No, I was just curious.
And I was just going to say, just the final thing, I've been talking about how we have these kind of 2 different populations, the closed model, and then we have the free range one, and they throw all these different things at it. They also look to see what factors were most likely to influence that antler growth, using some additional statistics. So a lot of great information that came out of this. I'll just highlight again, the 2 metrics that they were using for the antler growth were the number of points and the antler size, so that Boone and Crockett gross score.
Yeah, so let's get into the results here. So like, I was pretty impressed at the results that they got in the captive the captive population. And I guess like it's not that surprising because like if you know which doe is producing which buck, and you're trying to remove, like inferior antler genetics, like you can remove does and bucks, right? And so within just an 8-year period,
yeah, a little battle going on in the background there.
Crazy. But within just an 8-year period, which is they calculated as 2.7 generations of like deer turnover, they saw this like massive increase in antler quality. So they saw an increase of 4.3 points at a 1.5-year-old buck on average. So it went from 1.5-year-old bucks having an average of 4.2 points to 8.5. So these are like young bucks that are averaging more than 8 points, at a year and a half. That's crazy. And then the score increased by like 97 centimeters, which is like around 36 inches, somewhere in that ballpark. And like, just to like give a reference, like if you look at, for those of you that can see,
this buck right here, to point out his bucks.
No, but like, I mean, there's a good variety of different deer here. So this buck right here was 100. It would have been 130 if it had the one time that's not broken off. Same with this one here is like 127. Okay, so these two are like 130. Then this guy, this is so hard because it's backwards. This one right here is like just below 100 inches. Now, keep in mind that this buck is like way closer to the camera than this one. Like if I line them up, like that's a significant difference. So that's like the difference of 30 inches. And they saw a bigger increase than that. Like they saw like 36 inches. So that's like a huge difference. But that's for a captive bred situation. So think of like your high fence operations. That's why they're able to like breed these like freaks of nature that like all gross way over 200 inches.
I just want to point out, so they altered the heritability for the trait, or for like, the antler heritability. They had a high setting that was like 0.7. So like very high heritability. It's, it's really, really likely that an adult is going to pass on that same trait to the offspring. And they did low heritability, 0.3. And it made almost no difference, or 0.35. In that change in antler growth, because you have so much control over this population that they're really just forcing those individuals with those large antlers to have an effect. Yeah.
And so now we take that same model and we apply it to a free range situation. And so like one of the things they talked about is like in these free range situations, like they can't control for the does, right? So like, because they're trying to mimic sort of hunters selecting bucks that have like inferior antlers and removing them to see what effect they have. So that now they're not removing the does, they're only removing the bucks. And just that difference alone made it so that after 20 years, which is 5 to 7 generations, they saw an increase in points of like 0.1 to 0.9 points at 1.5 years old.
So
like pretty minimal.
More than twice as much time, right? Because it's 8 years compared to 20 years. And before you have over 4 points getting added, and now you have less than 1 point getting added.
Yeah. And like, I don't know if it's just me, but like, I didn't see any measure of the Boone and Crockett score increases for the free range ones. They only seem to talk about the points. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But good one. But anyway, I think the point here is that, with these free range things, when you cut out the ability to control which does are breeding, like you lose really the control over the genetics that are flowing through that population, because those does can go and breed anybody, any buck, and sort of dilute. If you have a buck with really good antler genetics that breeds a doe with terrible antler genetics, like you just like blend it all together and like you end up with sort of just this average thing. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind for everybody that's out there like, well, I killed this cull buck, but you have a piece of private land where deer can come and go, and you're not controlling for the does. Like, I'm sorry, but you're just not having any effect. So you might as well just let the cull bucks grow and see what they turn into, because at least they'll be, nicer bucks than a spike that you shot because you had to find some excuse to shoot a spike.
One other thing I just want to point out here, this is one of the, to me, this might be the most influential difference between the settings for that captive environment and the free range environment. Now, these metrics are based on, estimates from previous literature, but in the captive setting, they estimated that the average percentage of males that would be removed from that population was about 85%. 85%, that's pretty high. Now, that's in a captive setting. They can cull that. But that's why, even though you have such low heritability in that one situation where it's like 0.35, you can still drastically change the genetics of that system because you're taking out such a huge effect, right? Like, what is this?
I would imagine, like, as you go, like, you're taking less and less of them too, though. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, in the beginning, you might be taking 85%, but then as you start getting those better genetics, like, you start producing better bucks.
Mm-hmm. So for anyone out there that's really big into biology, this is just gene flow, basic gene flow. You have a huge reduction in the population with extremely intense selection on the specific trait. And because you have such high selection there, such a high selective force, you're going to see a result. Now, in the free range situation, so just keep in mind that 85% reduction in the captive setting. The free range situation or simulations, let me make sure I get these numbers right here. It ranged between 28 and 56%. So 28%, I mean, that's drastically lower than 85. 56 is also like largely lower. But I mean, that makes sense, right? If you're out in a population, like out in the wild, no management agency wants you to harvest 85% of all the bucks out there. That's just not realistic. So you can't have the same culling pressure as what you can in that captive situation that would be needed to drive this genetic effect.
Yeah, and then on top of that, they bring up the point that, like, there's a lot of other variables that can affect, the selection and propagation of like desirable genetics. Like, for instance, like, deer can move, like, so in these models, they assumed a closed population, even in the free range population, because it's like, how are they gonna, it's like, it's hard for them to include influx and outflux of genetics aside from, like, deer being killed, but they weren't considering, like, deer that are moving into the area that have totally random genetics that you have, like, no control over, and then coming in and breeding with a doe, and then changing the genes that are in that pool, so that can have an effect. You can also have, like, environmental factors that are selecting against, like, what you think is desirable. Like, for instance, like, I'm just going to throw something crazy out there. Like, maybe in a very oligotrophic system where, like, which means, like, has very low nutrients, like, maybe there's not a benefit to having really big antlers, right? Like, that's a lot of energetic cost that you're having to put towards, like, carrying those antlers around and growing those antlers. So maybe a smaller bucked deer would be, like, better off. And so the environment can literally, like cull in the opposite direction as well. Predation, there's other predators that don't give a crap about, antler size. There's all kinds of things that affect the way the genetics are passed on. So I think, like, really, like, the big take home message here is that if you're hunting public land or private land where deer can come and go, low fence, you cannot affect the antler genetics in a meaningful way. Like, if you think that taking cull bucks is having a positive impact on your herd, and mind you, they did show that there was a positive impact over 20 years. But the reality is, you're not you're probably not going to see those effects over your lifetime if you're trying to do that on a low fence or public land situation. So stop using the excuse. Shoot whatever you want.
I think there's two different ways of looking at maybe not so much cull or culling the population, but maybe more think about like you said before, like if you let the animal walk, of selective harvest in a sense, right? Where you can have it at the individual scale, and then you can also have it at the population scale. What this to me is saying is that at the population scale, it's not going to have any effect. You're not going to change the genetics of the population. At the individual scale, say you have 2 yearlings in front of you. One of them is 8-point yearling, and the other one's fork or spike. You're probably going to want to let that 8-point yearling walk, because he's probably going to turn out to be a really nice big mature buck.
It's going to be hard to let him walk, though.
It will be. I've been in that situation. I pulled the trigger. I was extremely happy with that buck. The guy that owned the property wasn't too happy about it. I mean, he was still excited for me, but he was like, that's the one that you want to let walk. And so at the individual scale, I think there is something to be said to selective harvest. Where you, again, this is something where if you're hunting public land,
that's selectiveness the other way around, though.
Exactly, because you're letting it walk. You're not culling the population for the younger ones. Chances are that fork that you harvested or that spike that you harvested wouldn't be the same quality buck as a 4, 5, 6-year-old as that one that was the 8-point. So in that sense, if you were to think of like the number of deer on the landscape that are moving forward to be these larger bucks, if you let those more, I'd say the larger, younger individuals mature, there will be more of them on the landscape. But that does not mean that over time, you're not going to have small deer in the landscape as well. They're still going to be there. It's just you might artificially inflate the proportion of bigger antler deer if you let them walk younger.
But there's also a lot of stories like when people will like literally collect antlers to show this. Like there's a lot of deer that like will look crappy for like the first like 3 years, and then like suddenly they hit 5 years and they just explode. There are a lot of deer that like tend to reach their full potential later. And they talk a little bit about this. Like this has a little bit to do with like the environment. Some bucks that are born earlier tend to grow faster in the beginning because they have more nutrients available to them in those developmental stages of their life. Whereas like other deer don't have that. They might not show that antler potential in the beginning, but later on in life, things kind of average out and then they're able to like really grow big antlers. So like, I think there is benefit to like letting young deer walk, public land, low fence land, whatever. Like if you want to see more big deer, like there's only one way to achieve that. And that's to let the small ones walk, which I'm not saying everybody should do that. I think if you're a new hunter, like you should smoke whatever. I mean, honestly, I don't care if you're a new hunter or not. If you want to shoot a deer, shoot a deer. Like I'm not going to tell anybody not to shoot a deer. But if one of the things that you want to see is like more big deer on the landscape, you need to increase the age class of the bucks on that property. And there's only one way to do it. And that's stop killing them when they're young. You got to reduce predation, whether it's humans or, natural predators. So,
and I also mentioned, just because management strategy might work in one location doesn't mean it's going to work in another, right? So you can look across the country. There's a whole suite of management applications, whether there's different point restrictions, number of bucks that can be harvested, season lengths, all sorts of things that are in place where managers are trying to, adjust these levers to the point where they're maximizing hunter success. And so hunter success can also vary from place to place, right? In some locations, hunter success might just be, did I harvest a deer that year? Whereas in other locations, it's going to be, did I harvest that trophy buck? Exactly. Yeah. So that's something where, these are all things that can be variable. And especially on public land, like, if you're trying to, like the cull buck idea on public land, because there's no control in any situation, in any way other than like the management strategies, right? If you have like the point restriction, then you're going to have some sort of control on, what gets passed on. But if you're allowed to harvest a spike, But you say, or what am I getting at here? If you harvest a spike on public land with the idea that deer is now going to allow, the other ones to survive, someone else might harvest that other deer too. Right? There's no effect that you're going to have on the population's genetics by trying to
you can always just scare the crap out of the deer, so that the chances that someone else is going to harvest it are lower. So we have like 5 minutes left. So Cody, I'm going to ask you this question: have you learned anything today that you feel like will change the way that you approach hunting?
This is kind of what I was thinking would be the result. I think you guys did a good job explaining it. It got me thinking, how much is like nature versus nurture, and how much do you really weigh, what mom or dad look like or whatever. Like it doesn't seem like that would be a 1-to-1 ratio either, especially for the does. From what I've seen and read, they have a good year, they have high condition, they're more likely to produce a healthy offspring. Like that, it's not always that doe would be producing bigger or healthier deer, as I understand, right? Like
didn't we do a paper like a while ago that looked at doe weight? Or maybe I was listening to somebody else's podcast. It was like they were talking about a study where like you can use the weight of does as an indicator of like antler size on a property. So like instead of like collecting all the data from the bucks, like you can just weigh all the does, and like the bigger the doe, the bigger the antlers tend to be. And they basically just concluded that that's because of like higher quality food sources and just like nutrient availability. So yeah, like I think the environment like has a huge effect on this stuff.
But I imagine there is some degree of influence from the female as well, like we were talking about before, and like they did in this controlled setting where a controlled simulation where if now again it's not a natural situation, it's not a natural wild organism, but they in their models, if there was a female that was constantly producing spikes, they would remove that. And so I think there probably is potential for that in the wild, especially if you have like a younger doe. That younger doe might be kicking out smaller bucks. Well, it's probably just going to have, you're only young for like a year or two. So,
yeah, I'm just wondering how realistic that, like, I don't know enough about how that actually works. Mm-hmm. But that kind of, those questions kind of came to mind. Where is it a genetics thing and it's fixed, or like Mark was talking about, how much is the environment really playing a role here?
I guess the big question is like, would you shoot a buck just because it's got screwed up antlers like this one?
Well, I mean, that's probably from fighting, right?
That's probably from an injury. I mean, it's not from fighting. I can tell you exactly what it's from. It's from it's from the bullet hole in its neck.
Right, I forgot about that.
Somebody probably tried to poach that deer, and it caused some weird antler growth. But
well, based on what you guys have explained, anything that excites me,
shoot it
down on public land.
Hell yeah! I mean, even on private land, man. If you get excited, shoot it.
Like, well, on open land, I guess I should say.
I mean, it's the whole idea of like pushing this like narrative on people that they have to wait for like big deer, which pisses me off.
I think it's something where, like, I've been in a situation where hunting private and the landowner said, please don't shoot any yearlings. And again, this is not culling the population. This is just allowing those deer to survive, right? Allowing them to get older. And that's understandable to me, but yeah. If it's someone who's saying, get rid of all the spikes, I'm like, I probably won't actively harvest a spike. The only reason that I would harvest a spike is if this is an animal that I know, like, this is a shot that 99% of the time I'm going to have a clear shot at the vitals. This animal is not going to suffer at all. You can never have a perfect shot every single time. But if this animal is in a position that makes it most likely for me to harvest this animal in a quick way, then I'm going to be more likely to get it. Because like you said earlier, Mark, like, when you open these things up, they're all the same on the inside.
Yeah. So this kind of reminds me of like I posted a video on like Instagram and YouTube and stuff of my nephews getting their first deer, and it's like it's a spike. I mean, it's a little bit more than the spike. It has like a tiny split on one, and then like a little bit of a brow tine coming out on the other one. So it's like a forky or whatever. I don't know, but like most of the people online have been like really supportive and like super pumped about it. And then there's like these people who are like, why would anybody shoot a spike? It's like, dude, it's a 10-year-old kid's first deer. He can shoot whatever the hell he wants. Somebody was like, oh, if you can't pull back a bow, you should wait till gun season. Nobody should use a crossbow. And I'm like, dude, it's a freaking 10-year-old kid. Like, what are you talking about? And just, I think this is like one of the things that's like so wrong with the hunting community is that we all are trying to like, I say we all, like the royal we, like people are just trying to push their values onto everybody else and like can't understand the idea that like we don't all have to have the exact same value as long as we're doing things legally, you know,
and ethically, you know, like I think there was something we said to that too, but
I mean, we can go into a discussion on ethics for hours, and Matt, you and I have talked about this stuff too, but like not everybody's ethics are built on the same value system either, you know, like for me, ethics is all about recovering the animal for consumption. You know, like I'm more willing to take a shot that I'm confident will lead to harvest, but might take just like a little bit longer for that animal to die, because I can justify, in my mind, I can justify that by knowing that the animal won't have suffered for nothing because I'm going to eat it. But for other people, like that aspect's like less important, and it's all about like how long did it take for that animal to die? You know, I think there's like a complex dynamic between like all of these different factors, but the way that they weigh in is different for everybody.
And you know, also kind of somewhat related, but you know, someone might say it's not ethical to take a 60-yard shot with a bow, and that might be true for one hunter that can't shoot. And that doesn't practice to 60 yards, but for another hunter that practices out to 120 yards and can have an extremely tight grouping at 60 yards, and they're familiar with, you know, the situation, they're paying attention to things like wind, they're paying attention to all the environment, that can be a very ethical shot, right? And so there's
but also like
variability as well.
I mean, we honestly should do a podcast just like talking about this stuff, like because we can just go on a tangent here, but because I have a lot to say about it. I'll have a lot to say about it. Cody might have a lot to say about it. We can get someone else who has a lot to say about it to come and talk about ethics. But anyway, like I think, you know, the big point here is like we just got to stop pushing other people to accept our values and ethics.
I do, as someone newer to hunting, I've been pleasantly surprised where it seems people are generally more accepting of you being excited about something you got than them pushing their own ethics.
Well, you probably haven't gone on like Facebook groups and posted about things, because that's where like, you know, the keyboard warrior people say things online that like you would never say in real life, you know, and it's frustrating that we do that. Like I think that we really like we need to take a look at ourselves as a society and realize that like everything's online nowadays. Maybe we should really think about the things that we are willing to say like online versus in person. And maybe if you're not willing to say it in person, maybe just don't freaking say it online, you know?
But wouldn't you say that's still the minority though?
I would agree with that. Well, I think if you look at what's online, I think you're going to be missing out on a lot of people who don't have that mentality, right? Like I don't comment online. I'll just admit that. Like, I don't respond. Like if someone shoots a buck, I'll think to myself, oh, nice buck. Or, you know, whether it's a big buck, little buck, I'll think congrats, right? I'm not going to be saying something. So you're kind of biasing it towards those negative.
It's usually the people that have something negative to say that are going to be the ones that are going to comment, because the people that are like, oh, nice, like they're not even going to comment, like you said.
Yeah. So, I mean, like just talking to hunters out in the woods, like in my experience, like when I'm dragging something out, if I've got, you know, I've shot plenty of forks and smaller bucks, and, you know, at least what people are saying, you know, maybe they're just putting on a face, but they'll at least say congrats, right? They're not saying like, why did you shoot that thing? So like from my personal experience, the people who I've interacted with, have been very supportive. They have been very friendly. But sure, there are going to be those folks out there that are going to be, those assholes out there that just like think that they're better off, and they know better than you do, and and I think that's something where you just gotta say, you know what, I'm the one that's leaving the woods with a deer today. I'm happy.
Yeah, and for me, like thinking about like if this affects the way that I hunt, I don't think it really does. Like, I don't give a shit about cull bucks. Like, and my approach is always going to be like shoot the first thing that's legal because I got a freezer to fill. Mm-hmm. But once my freezer's full, that's when I'll start being a little more picky.
Didn't you make a shirt out of that? What was it? Shooting tomorrow's giants today.
The Boom and Crockpot Club. Yeah, we have a Swamp and Stomp shirt. It's the Boom and Crockpot Club. Shooting tomorrow's trophies today.
Boom and Crockpot?
Yeah, boom and Crockpot. Oh. I should bring that back for like a limited edition.
Do you have is the picture a Crockpot with like a little fork sticking out of it?
No, but it is actually the picture on the shirt is like a black and white version of this buck.
That's great. That guy is just like my first buck.
Nice 11-inch spike. So, and now I can't get it back on the wall. There it goes. But anyway, I think we should probably wrap it up, guys. I gotta go cook dinner and all that jazz. So,
sounds good.
Yeah. You guys got any wise words to add?
Be happy with whatever you get in the woods. We're fortunate that we have opportunities to hunt these organisms, these animals, that we get to interact with them. For me, any animal that I harvest, it's enjoyment. There's definitely some sadness to it. I just still taking the life, but like Mark said and Cody have said, it's filling the freezer and it's a successful hunt.
Damn right. Yeah. All right. Peace out, guys.
All right. Thanks for listening.